Dr. Sarah Chen looked at the clock on her office wall. It was past midnight on Frontier Station Kepler 442. The station floated quietly in space far from Earth. Sarah rubbed her tired eyes and returned to her computer screen. She was writing reports about how different alien species behaved. This was her job as a xenobiological liaison. The station was not like other places. Here, humans worked alongside aliens from many worlds. There were tall insect-like beings called Thrin. There were bird-like Morellians with bright feathers. And there were the Vikrell. The Vikrell were different from everyone else. They stood 8 feet tall with scales that looked like metal. They had sharp claws that could cut through steel. Their eyes glowed yellow in the dark. They came from a world where everything wanted to kill everything else. Even the plants on their planet ate meat. Other species feared the Vikrell. They were known across the galaxy as warriors and hunters. Most aliens stayed away from them. They gave them space when they walked down the hallways. They spoke to them with respect and fear. Sarah was one of only 3 humans on the station. She had been here for 6 months now. She studied how different species acted around each other. She took notes on their behaviors. She tried to understand their cultures. It was fascinating work, but it kept her up late many nights. Tonight, she was comparing development patterns in young aliens. She typed quickly, stopping only to drink her coffee. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she drank it anyway. Then she heard a sound at her door. It was a soft scratching noise. Sarah stopped typing and listened. The scratching came again, more urgent this time. She stood up and walked to the door. When she opened it, she froze. 2 small Vikrell stood in the hallway. They were young, maybe 4 feet tall. Their scales had not yet darkened to adult black. They were still the gray-green color of children. One of them held a thermal blanket in its claws. The blanket dragged on the floor behind them. Sarah recognized them. They were Kirsch and Vithra, the children of Ambassador Vikrell Tor. She had seen them around the station before, but she had never been this close to them. The cubs were shaking. Their bodies trembled in small, quick movements. Sarah understood immediately. The station had lowered the temperature 3 days ago. A delegation from an ice world had arrived, and the environmental controls had been adjusted for their comfort. For warm-blooded species like humans, it was just a bit chilly, but for others it must be very cold. The 2 young Vikrell looked at Sarah with wide eyes. They did not run away. They did not attack. They just stood there shivering, holding their blanket. They looked scared and cold and very, very young. Sarah made a decision. She stepped back and opened her door wider. The cubs hesitated for a moment. Then they shuffled inside, dragging their blanket with them. Sarah walked back to her desk and sat down. She looked at the cubs and then at her computer screen. The cubs stood in the middle of her office, unsure what to do. They clutched their blanket and watched her with those glowing yellow eyes. Then something interesting happened. The cubs noticed the warm air coming from the vents under Sarah's desk. Heat always rose to the ceiling, but her desk had vents that blew warm air across the floor. The cubs moved slowly toward the warmth. They dragged their blanket to Sarah's desk. They did not ask permission. They simply pulled the blanket underneath her workspace right next to her feet. Then they curled up together in a tight ball. The blanket covered most of their small bodies, but it had gotten twisted and bunched up. Sarah looked down at them. She saw their spine ridges were not covered properly. Those ridges were sensitive to cold, she knew from her studies. Without thinking too much about it, she reached down. Her hands moved carefully. She straightened the blanket and tucked it around their bodies. She made sure the spine ridges were covered. She adjusted the edges so no cold air could get in. The cubs watched her hands with wide eyes, but they did not move away. When she finished, she said quietly, "There you go. Much better." Then she turned back to her computer and continued typing her report. Her feet now shared space with 2 young Vikrell. She could feel their warmth near her ankles. After a few minutes, she heard soft breathing sounds. The cubs had fallen asleep. One of them had moved closer in its sleep. Its small clawed hand now rested against her shoe. Sarah kept working. She typed her reports and sipped her cold coffee. She did not move her feet even when they started to feel cramped. The cubs slept peacefully beneath her desk. To Sarah, this seemed perfectly normal. They were cold. She had warmth. They were children. It was simple. What Sarah did not know was that security cameras watched everything on the station, and what she had just done was being seen by very surprised aliens in the security office. What she thought was normal was about to change everything. In the security office, Commander Zelix sat at his station. He was a Thrin, an insect-like being with 4 arms and compound eyes. His job was to monitor the security feeds from all over the station. Tonight had been quiet. Most beings were asleep. He was reviewing old footage when something caught his attention. On screen 7, he saw 2 small V-Krell entering a human's office. His body went rigid. He leaned closer to the screen. The cubs dragged a blanket behind them. They moved into Dr. Chen's office. The door closed behind them. Zelix felt panic rising in his thorax. V-Krell cubs were dangerous. They had claws and teeth. They had hunting instincts. And now 2 of them were alone with a human. He switched to the camera inside the office. What he saw made him fall backward from his chair. The human was not running. She was not calling for help. She was sitting at her desk, typing on her computer. The cubs had pulled their blanket under her desk. And then, as Zelix watched in horror, the human reached down toward them. He expected violence. He expected blood. Instead, he saw Dr. Chen's hands move gently. She was tucking the blanket around the cubs. She was covering them properly. She was making sure they were warm. Then she went back to typing as if nothing unusual had happened. Zelix could not believe what he was seeing. He hit the alarm button with 2 of his hands while his other hands typed frantically. Within seconds, Junior Officer Kethra rushed into the room. She was a Morellian, a bird-like species with blue and gold feathers. "What is wrong?" Kethra asked, her wings spreading in alarm. Zelix pointed at the screen with a shaking claw. Kethra looked at the monitor. Her feathers stood up straight. Her beak opened in shock. "Human in danger. V-Krell juveniles in unsealed room?" she cried out. They scrambled a security team immediately. 6 trained officers grabbed their weapons and ran through the corridors. They moved as fast as they could without making noise. They did not want to startle the V-Krell cubs. Startled predators were even more dangerous. When they reached Dr. Chen's office, they took positions around the door. The team leader counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. They burst into the room with weapons ready. They expected chaos. They expected a hostage situation. They expected the worst. Instead, they found Sarah typing at her computer. The cubs were sleeping peacefully under her desk. One of them had its small clawed hand resting against her ankle. The other was curled up tight against its sibling. The blanket covered them both. They looked comfortable and safe. Sarah looked up from her work. She seemed surprised to see the security team. "Oh, hello," she said calmly. "Is something wrong?" She spoke in a normal voice, as if armed security teams burst into her office every day. The team leader, a large Fenrax named Gorth, stared at her. His wolf-like ears lay flat against his head in confusion. "Doctor," he said slowly, "there are V-Krell cubs in your office." Sarah looked down at her feet. "Yes," she agreed. They were cold. The security team looked at each other. They did not know what to do. Gorth spoke into his radio. "We need to extract the cubs," he said. "Carefully." 2 officers moved forward slowly. They reached toward the sleeping cubs. The moment they got close, both cubs woke up. The cubs hissed. Their small fangs showed. Their eyes glowed brighter. Their claws extended. The officers jumped back. Everyone's hands moved to their weapons. The cubs looked ready to attack. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Then Sarah spoke. Her voice was soft but clear. "It's all right, sweethearts," she said. "Just a bit longer." She did not move from her chair. She did not look scared. She just kept her hands on her keyboard and spoke like a mother calming children. The cubs stopped hissing. Their claws retracted. They looked up at Sarah's face. Then they settled back down under the blanket. Within moments, they were asleep again. One of them made a small purring sound. The security team stood frozen. No one moved. No one spoke. They had just watched a human calm 2 V-Krell cubs with words, with kindness, with a tone of voice that said everything was safe. The cubs had listened. They had trusted her. They had gone back to sleep. Gorth found his voice first. "Doctor," he said carefully, "you called them sweethearts." Sarah looked up at him. She seemed confused by his confusion. "Yes," she said. "Is that a problem?" Gorth's mouth opened and closed several times. He could not find words. Kethra spoke through the radio from the security office. Her voice shook. "She called V-Krell cubs sweethearts," she repeated, as if saying it again would make it make sense. It did not make sense. Nothing about this made sense. Someone contacted Ambassador Vikrel Tor. They told him his children were in a human's office. They told him to come quickly. They did not tell him what else they had seen. They could not find the words to explain it. The security team stayed in the office. They kept their weapons ready but pointed at the floor. They watched the human work at her computer. They watched the cubs sleep under her desk. They tried to understand what they were seeing. Every few minutes, Sarah would reach down without looking. She would adjust the blanket slightly. She would make sure the cubs stayed covered and warm. She did this while typing with one hand. She did not stop working. She did not seem bothered by any of it. Ambassador Vikrel Tor arrived 15 minutes later. He came running. His heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors. He was 8.5 feet of scaled muscle and battle scars. He had fought in 3 wars. He had led armies. He had never run from anything in his life. But now he ran because his children were in danger. He burst through the office door, ready for battle. What he found stopped him completely. His children were asleep, under a human's desk, covered with a blanket. The human was typing on her computer. She looked up when he entered. "Ambassador," Sarah said pleasantly, "I think your kids got cold. The station really should maintain separate climate zones." She said it like she was commenting on the weather, like it was a minor inconvenience, like she had not just done something impossible. For the first time in his long life, Ambassador Vikrel Tor had nothing to say. He stood in the doorway, his mouth slightly open, his yellow eyes wide. He looked at his sleeping children. He looked at the calm human. He looked at the security team that stood watching with the same confusion he felt. And he could not speak. Sarah Chen looked at Ambassador Vikrel Tor and waited for him to speak. The large Vikrel stood in her doorway like a statue. His scales caught the light from her desk lamp. Finally, she broke the silence. "Would you like some coffee?" she asked. "It's not very good, but it's warm." The ambassador blinked. That seemed to break whatever spell held him. He looked down at his cubs again. They were still sleeping peacefully. "You," he started, then stopped. "They," he tried again. "How?" He could not finish any sentence. Sarah stood up carefully so she would not disturb the cubs with her feet. She walked around her desk. "I noticed they've been looking tired lately," she said. She spoke in a normal conversational tone. "I recognize the symptoms of cold stress from my xenobiology training. When the station lowered the temperature, I wondered if it might affect species from warmer worlds." Vikrel Tor finally found his voice. "You studied this?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "Of course. I study all species on the station. It's my job." She said it simply, like it was obvious, like any reasonable person would do the same. The ambassador moved slowly into the room. He knelt down, which was difficult for his large frame. He looked at his children under the desk. The blanket covered them completely. They breathed slowly and deeply. They looked more peaceful than he had seen them in days. "Vikrel juveniles cannot regulate their body temperature," he said quietly. His deep voice was softer than anyone had heard before. "On our homeworld, they stay in sun dens, or they sleep near the thermal vents, or sometimes near the hot-blooded herd beasts we keep." Sarah listened carefully. This was new information. "But on the station?" she asked. Vikrel Tor stood up again. "We have heat lamps in our quarters, but Krush and Vithra spend much time in the education wing. The temperature there is controlled for the majority species' comfort. It has been too cold for them." He looked at Sarah with his yellow eyes. "Why did you help them?" he asked. It was not an accusation. It was genuine curiosity. Sarah seemed confused by the question. "They were cold," she said. "They're children." She said it as if these two facts explained everything. For her, they did. By now, more beings had gathered outside Sarah's office. Word had spread fast through the station. Everyone wanted to see the human with Vikrel cubs. They crowded in the hallway, craning their necks to look inside. There were Thrin and Morellians and Kalari from the water world. There were Zendari drones and Fenrax guards. All of them watched in silence. Commander Zelix had come up from the security office. He stood at the front of the crowd. His 4 arms were crossed in a gesture that meant confusion in Thrin body language. "I have never seen this," he said to the others. "Never in all my years." A Kalari scientist named Splash of Rain spoke up. Her translator made her clicking sounds into words. The human did not see a threat. She saw children in need. This is unusual behavior. Other beings nodded. This was unusual. This was strange. This was not how things worked in the galaxy. Ambassador Vikrel Tor turned to face the crowd. His presence filled the room. On my world, he said slowly, adults do not share warmth. We are solitary hunters. Cubs must fend for themselves. They find heat where they can. Many do not survive the first cold season. His voice was heavy with old pain. The strong survive, he continued. This is our way. It has always been our way. He looked back at Sarah. But you shared your warmth. You made yourself vulnerable. You worked with your back to them. With your feet trapped under your desk. If they had wanted to hurt you, you could not have escaped. Sarah frowned slightly. They weren't going to hurt me, she said. They were just cold and scared. The ambassador made a sound that might have been a laugh. You knew this? He asked, and how? Sarah shrugged. They're kids. Kids act the same everywhere when they're scared and need help. One of the Morellians in the hallway, an elder named Wing of Dawn, spoke up. But they have claws. They have fangs. Even young Vikrel are dangerous. Sarah looked at the crowd for the first time. She seemed surprised so many beings were there. Well, yes, she said. Human children have teeth too. They can bite. But you don't stop helping them because they might bite you, the crowd murmured. This logic was strange to them. They helped their own young, yes. But other species young? Young predators? This was not normal. This was not safe. This was not done. Ambassador Vikrel Tor asked another question. His voice was very quiet now. Would you have done this if they were not the ambassador's children? If they were cubs from a worker or a soldier? Sarah looked at him like he had asked if water was wet. Would I tuck cold kids into a blanket? Of course, she paused. Why wouldn't I? The ambassador pressed further. Even if they could harm you? Even if they were dangerous? Sarah's face showed real confusion now. Ambassador, she said slowly as if explaining something very simple. They're children. She said those two words as if they contained the answer to every question. For her they did. The hallway fell completely silent. Every being there was thinking about what they had heard. They were trying to understand this human way of thinking. Children were children. It did not matter what species. It did not matter if they were dangerous. It did not matter who their parents were. If they needed help, you helped them. This was the human position. This was what Sarah believed, and she believed it so completely that she could not imagine thinking any other way. Under the desk, one of the cubs stirred. Thra opened one eye and looked up at all the beings staring into the office. She made a small sleepy sound. Without looking away from the ambassador, Sarah reached down. Her hand found the blanket by memory. She tucked it back around the cub's spine ridge. Phythra closed her eye and went back to sleep. Sarah had done this without thinking, without looking. Her hands had moved automatically while she talked. She had provided care while doing something else entirely. The crowd had seen it. They had all seen it. And they were beginning to understand that something very important had just happened. Something that might change everything they thought they knew about humans. 3 days later, the Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. Representatives from 15 species gathered in the main conference room. The topic was simple but troubling. What should they do about humans? The meeting room was large and circular. Each species had their own section with proper atmosphere and gravity. The Kalari sat in water tanks. The Thryn hung from special perches. The Vikrel had heated platforms. Everyone had seen the security footage by now. Everyone had opinions. Commander Zelek spoke first. He projected the video onto the main screen. Everyone watched Sarah Chen tuck the blanket around the sleeping cubs. They watched her go back to work. They watched her adjust the blanket again later without even looking down. The Thryn clicked his mandibles nervously. This behavior is documented across all 3 humans on the station, he said. A Morellian delegate named Silversong raised her wing. What do you mean, all 3? She asked. Zelix pulled up more footage. Engineer Mike Rodriguez found a group of young Zendari drones struggling with a puzzle. He spent his lunch break teaching them card games. They now visit him every day. More footage appeared. Dr. James Okonkwo regularly watches offspring from multiple species. He has no training in xenopediatrics, yet parents trust him with their young. He feeds them. He plays with them. He helps them with their homework. The screen showed James sitting on the floor surrounded by young beings from 4 different species. He was helping all of them at the same time. The delegates looked at each other. Wing of Dawn, the Morellian elder, spoke up. "This is a pattern," she said. "Not an accident. Not one unusual human. This is how they all behave." Murmurs of agreement filled the room. Splash of Rain, the Kalari scientist, activated her water tank's speaker system. "I have been researching human evolutionary history," she said. Her translator made her bubble sounds into words. "What I found explains this behavior. Human infants are born extremely helpless. They cannot walk. They cannot feed themselves. They cannot survive alone for years." She pulled up charts and graphs. "Most species have offspring that can function independently within weeks or months. Human young require constant care for many years. This created evolutionary pressure for cooperative breeding. Humans had to work together to raise children. They call it takes a village." A Zendari hive mind representative pulsed with curiosity. "But why extend this behavior beyond their own species?" it asked through its translator. Splash of Rain changed the images on the screen. "Because humans don't just care for their own offspring. They care for many things. They adopt animals. They rescue creatures from disasters. They risk their lives for beings that cannot help them in return." The Zendari pulsed again, this time with what might have been distress. "We have observed this," it said. "Humans on this station named the cleaning robots. They gave them personalities. They celebrated a robot's activation day as if it were a birthday. The robots have no sentience, yet humans treat them as if they do. This caused an uproar in the chamber. Many delegates had not known this. The idea was disturbing to some species. It was fascinating to others. Silversong fluffed her feathers. "On my homeworld," she said, "we care for our nestlings intensely. But once they fledge, they are independent. We do not extend care beyond our own kind. This is normal. This is natural." "Exactly," said a Fenrax warrior named Drac. "We protect our pack. We hunt for our pack. But other species? No. That would be foolish. Wasteful. Dangerous." Many heads and appendages nodded in agreement. Ambassador Vikrel Tor had been silent until now. He stood up slowly. His large frame commanded attention. "I wish to share something," he said. "Dr. Chen told me that human children are dangerous too, that they have teeth and can bite. But humans do not stop helping their children because of this danger." He looked around the room. "She asked me if I would help a cold child. I said I would help a Vikrel cub, of course. She asked if the cub's parent status mattered. I said no, a Vikrel cub is a Vikrel cub." He paused. Then she asked, what if the cub was not Vikrel? What if it was Thrin or Morellian or Kalari? I had no answer. The room was very quiet now. Vikrel Tor continued. "For humans, the question answers itself. A child is a child. Species does not matter. Danger does not matter. Usefulness does not matter. If a child needs help, they help. They cannot imagine doing otherwise." Splash of Rain made a sound of understanding. "This is why they are good with many species," she said. "They pack bond indiscriminately. To them, everything can become part of their pack. Other species, animals, robots, even plants. I have seen a human talk to a plant." The Zendari pulsed with what might have been amusement. "We thought this was a weakness," it said. "We thought humans were naive, vulnerable, easy to manipulate." It paused. "We were wrong. This is their strength." Commander Zelix brought up more data. "My analysis shows that humans can provide care while performing complex tasks." Dr. Chen tucked the blanket while typing. Engineer Rodriguez taught games while repairing systems. Dr. Okonkwo fed younglings while writing reports. They multitask care automatically. They do not need to think about it. A Thrin scientist named Click spoke up. "This is extraordinary. Most species must focus completely on caregiving or completely on work. Humans do both simultaneously. Their brains are wired for this. They can switch their attention rapidly. They can monitor multiple young beings while working on something else entirely." Wing of Dawn ruffled her feathers thoughtfully. "The question before us is this. Are humans dangerous because of this trait? Or are they valuable because of it?" The room erupted in discussion. Some thought humans were too trusting, too willing to help potential threats. Others thought this made humans perfect for diplomatic work. For building bridges between species. Ambassador Vikrel Tor raised his hand for silence. "My cubs have not left Dr. Chen's office in 3 days," he said. "They sleep there. They study there. She works around them. She brings them food. She makes sure they are warm. She scolds them when they fight. She praises them when they do well, and in 3 days they have learned more and grown healthier than in the 3 months before. He looked at each delegate in turn. Whatever we decide about humans, we must understand this. They make you want to be protected by them. They make you feel safe, even when you know they could be dangerous, even when you know you should be afraid. You feel safe because they care, not because they have to, not because it benefits them, but because to them, caring is as natural as breathing. The meeting continued for hours. But something had changed. The delegates were no longer asking if humans were dangerous. They were asking how to learn from them, how to work with them, how to benefit from this strange and wonderful trait. Because in a galaxy full of species that only cared for their own kind, humans offered something new. Something the galaxy did not know it needed. They offered care without boundaries, protection without prejudice, love without limits. 2 weeks after the council meeting, strange things began happening all over the station. Other species started testing the humans. Not openly, not officially, but they tested them nonetheless. They wanted to see if this caregiving behavior was real, if it was consistent, if it could be trusted. The first test came from the Kalari. A young Kalari named Bubble and Stream was swimming in the public pools when her school group left without her. She was only 7 cycles old. She panicked and started making distress calls. Sarah Chen was walking past the pool area. She heard the calls. Sarah did not know this was a test. She did not know that Bubble and Stream's parents were watching from above. She only saw a scared child. She knelt by the pool and spoke softly. "Hey there, it's okay. What's wrong?" Bubble and Stream clicked her distress through sobs. "My school left. I am alone." Sarah was on her communication device immediately. She called the Kalari section. She described Bubble and Stream. She gave the location. While she waited for someone to come, she sat by the pool. She talked to the young Kalari. She asked about her favorite foods, her favorite games, her friends. By the time her parents arrived, Bubble and Stream was laughing. Sarah had been on a video call with her supervisor the entire time. She had conducted the call while comforting the child. Her supervisor had not even known she was helping someone. The second test came from the Thrin. A nymph named Tsik tore his wing membrane in the ventilation system. Tsik's father brought him to the medical bay. Engineer Mike Rodriguez happened to be there fixing a scanner. He saw the young Thrin crying. The medical staff was busy with an emergency. The wait would be at least an hour. Mike looked at the torn wing. He had no medical training for Thrin physiology, but he knew basic first aid. He found medical tape. He gently held the wing membrane together. He applied the tape in a way that would hold but not damage the delicate tissue further. He talked to Tsik the whole time. He told him about earth butterflies, about how they also had delicate wings, how they were beautiful and strong. Tsik stopped crying. When the doctor finally came, the doctor looked at Mike's work and nodded approval. "You did well," the doctor said. Mike shrugged. "Kid needed help," he said simply. The third test was not a test at all. A Fenrax adolescent named Snarl was having problems at school. He was aggressive. He got into fights. He broke things. His parents did not know what to do. Fenrax culture said that aggressive youngsters needed strict discipline and isolation, but nothing was working. Snarl was getting worse. Dr. James Okonkwo saw Snarl sitting alone in a corridor one day. The young Fenrax was growling to himself. James sat down next to him. Not too close. Just near enough. "Rough day?" he asked. Snarl growled louder. "Go away, human." James did not go away. He sat there quietly. After a long moment, Snarl spoke. "Everyone hates me." His voice was small and sad. James nodded. "That must be really hard," he said. Snarl looked at him suspiciously. "You are not going to tell me to behave better? To control my anger?" James shook his head. "Nah, I figure you've heard that enough. Want to tell me why you're angry?" And Snarl did. He talked for an hour. James listened. He did not judge. He did not lecture. He just listened. At the end, James said, "You know what helps me when I'm angry? I squeeze this." He pulled out a small rubber ball from his pocket. "It's a stress ball. Gives your hand something to do." He handed it to Snarl. "Try it." Snarl squeezed the ball. His claws dug into it. But the ball did not break. He squeezed harder. The ball compressed and then expanded again. Snarl's ears perked up slightly. "This is..." "Good," he said. James smiled. Keep it. I've got more. He stood up. If you ever want to talk, I'm in Lab 7 most afternoons. He walked away. Snarl sat there squeezing the ball. The next day he came to Lab 7, and the day after that, and the day after that. James gave him tasks to do. Simple things. Organizing samples, cleaning equipment, things that kept his hands busy. Snarl's aggression decreased. His grades improved. His parents were amazed. Word spread through the station. The humans passed every test, every scenario, every challenge. They helped without being asked. They cared without expecting payment. They solved problems that other species could not solve, and they did it all while continuing their regular work. The multitasking was remarkable. Sarah would write reports while making sure the Vikrel cubs did their homework. Mike would repair systems while teaching young Zendari about Earth music. James would analyze samples while letting young beings from multiple species play in his lab. The Vikrel cubs, Kirsch and Vithra, had changed the most. They had not left Sarah's office area. She had arranged cushions for them near her desk. She had set up a study space. She brought them food that was compatible with their biology. She made sure they had enough warmth. She taught them about human culture, while they taught her about Vikrel history. At night, when she left, they went back to their quarters. But every morning they returned. Ambassador Vikrel Tor watched his children transform. They were healthier, happier, more curious, more confident. He had raised many younglings before. He had never seen such rapid positive development. One day he came to Sarah's office. He watched her work for a moment. She was typing with both hands. Vthra was reading on a datapad nearby. Kirsch was doing math problems. Every few minutes Sarah would glance at them. She would correct Kirsch's math. She would help Vithra pronounce a difficult word. She would adjust Vithra's blanket. All without stopping her work. How do you do it? Vikrel Tor asked. Sarah looked up. Do what? She asked. He gestured at everything. Work and care at the same time. My species cannot do this. We must focus on one thing or the other. You do both as if it is nothing. Sarah thought about it. I guess it's just how we're raised, she said. Human parents do this all the time. They cook dinner while helping with homework. They drive cars while singing songs to their kids. They work from home while watching their children. We learn to split our attention. It becomes automatic. Vikrel Tor was quiet for a long time. Then he said, You are teaching me something important, Dr. Chen. You are showing me that strength and care are not opposites, that providing protection does not require isolation, that love does not make one weak, Sarah smiled. No, she said. Love makes you strong, because it gives you something worth protecting. The ambassador looked at his cubs. They were focused on their work. They were not watching for threats. They were not hiding. They were learning and growing in a space that felt safe, a space that a human had created without even trying, just by being herself, just by caring. Throughout the station, other parents were noticing the same thing. Young beings who spent time with humans were developing better. They were calmer, more curious, more willing to try new things. The humans were not trying to parent them. They were just being present, just being available, just caring when care was needed. And somehow that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. 6 months after that first night, the Galactic Council met again. This time the meeting was formal. This time, they would make decisions that would affect the entire galaxy. The chamber was full. Every species sent their highest representatives. The topic was humanity's role in the galactic community. Ambassador Vikrel Tor was the first to speak. He stood at the central podium. His scales gleamed under the lights. His voice was strong and clear. Honored delegates, he began. I have been asked to share my observations about humans. I have worked with them for nearly a year now. I have watched them closely, and I have reached a conclusion that may surprise you. He paused and looked around the chamber. Humans are the most dangerous species I have ever encountered. The room erupted in noise. Some delegates nodded, others protested. Vikrel Tor raised his hand for silence. Let me finish. They are dangerous because they make you want to be protected by them. They are dangerous because they make you lower your guard. They are dangerous because they make you feel safe. He gestured to a screen that showed images of the station. Look at what has happened. My cubs sleep in a human's office. Kalari younglings swim with human engineers. Thrin nymphs seek human advice. Fenrax adolescents ask humans for help. Why? Because humans have proven time and again that they will care for anyone who needs care. A Morellian delegate spoke up. But Ambassador, surely this is a weakness. Surely this caring for everyone makes them vulnerable. Vikrel Tor made a sound that was almost a laugh. That is what I thought at first. But I was wrong. Their caring is not a weakness. It is their greatest strength. Because when you care for someone, they care for you in return. Humans have built connections across every species on this station. Not through force. Not through trade. Through care. Splash of Rain, the Kalari scientist, spoke next. We have data to support this, she said. Her tank glowed with bioluminescence as she spoke. Youth development metrics have improved by 40% for beings who interact regularly with humans. Conflict incidents have decreased by 60% in areas where humans work. Cross-species cooperation has increased by 80%. She displayed graphs and charts. Furthermore, humans fill a unique role in galactic civilization. Most species are either predators or prey, either cooperative or solitary, either emotional or logical. Humans are all of these things at once. They are cooperative apex predators. They are emotional problem solvers. They are logical caregivers. This combination is unique. The Zendari hive mind pulsed with understanding. They bridge gaps that we cannot bridge ourselves, it said. A Vikrel and a Kalari have nothing in common. Their worlds are opposite. Their biology is opposite. Their culture is opposite. But both can relate to a human. Both can trust a human. The human becomes the connection point. Commander Zelix added his voice. I propose that we create a new role in the Galactic Council. The position of Interspecies Youth Development Director. And I propose that we offer this position to Dr. Sarah Chen. Murmurs filled the room. This was unprecedented. Humans had been part of the galactic community for less than a year. To give them such an important role so quickly was unusual. But as the delegates talked, they realized something. They had all seen the changes on the station. They had all heard the stories. They all knew younglings who had benefited from human care. The vote was called. It was unanimous. Dr. Sarah Chen would become the first director of Interspecies Youth Development. The next day, Sarah was called to the council chamber. She had no idea why. She thought maybe she had done something wrong. She brought Kirsch and Vithra with her because it was a school day and they always studied in her office. When she entered the chamber, she was surprised to see so many important beings. Ambassador Vikrel Tor explained the new position. He explained that they wanted her to lead it. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I'm not sure I'm qualified. I'm just a xenobiologist. I study behavior. I don't have training in child development or education. Wing of Dawn ruffled her feathers kindly. Dr. Chen, you have been caring for children from multiple species for months. You have improved their health, their learning, their happiness. You do this while performing your regular duties. You are already doing the job. We are simply making it official. Sarah looked down at Krish and Vithra. They looked back at her with their glowing yellow eyes. They had grown so much in 6 months. They were taller, healthier, more confident. What do you two think? She asked them. Krish clicked his tongue thoughtfully. You should do it, he said. Other cubs should have what we have. Vithra nodded agreement. You make things better, she said simply. Sarah smiled. Okay, she said. I'll do it. But I'll need help. Mike and James should be part of this too. The council agreed immediately. The 3 humans became the core team of the new Interspecies Youth Development Program. Within weeks, a youth center opened on the station. It had warm spaces for cold world species, cool spaces for hot world species, water areas for aquatic species, perches for flying species. Everything was designed for comfort and safety. At first, only a few parents brought their offspring. They were cautious, curious but careful. They watched how the humans interacted with their young. They saw gentleness and firmness in equal measure. They saw boundaries being set with kindness. They saw encouragement and correction. They saw care. More parents came. Word spread beyond the station. Other stations asked for human advisors. Planets requested human teachers. The demand grew faster than the supply. Earth started training more xenobiologists, more engineers, more specialists. All of them learned the same thing. Care for the young, regardless of species. The rest will follow. One evening, Sarah sat in her office. It was not really an office anymore. It had become the heart of the youth center. The walls were covered with drawings from young beings of 15 different species. Cushions and blankets filled the corners. Heat lamps and cooling fans provided comfort. Her desk was still there, but now it was surrounded by smaller desks and study spaces. Krush and Vithra were there, as always. But now they were not alone. A Thrin nymph was doing homework at one of the small desks. 3 Kalari younglings played in a warm pool that Mike had installed. A Zandari drone sat with Sarah, and she was teaching it to draw. A young Fenrax was squeezing a stress ball and reading quietly. 2 Morellian chicks were napping in a perch near the ceiling. Sarah was working on a report. Her hands typed steadily, but every few moments she would pause. She would check on the younglings. She would answer a question. She would settle a disagreement. She would adjust a blanket. She would praise good work. She would correct bad behavior. She did all of this without breaking her concentration on her work. It was automatic. It was natural. It was human. Ambassador Vikrel Tor stood at the door watching. He came by most evenings now, sometimes to collect his cubs, sometimes just to observe. A new delegate had arrived on the station today, a Zentari from a warrior culture. The Zentari had asked Vikrel Tor about humans. Are they strong? The Zentari had asked. Can they fight? Vikrel Tor had thought carefully about his answer. Humans are not the strongest species, he had said. They are not the fastest. They are not the most technologically advanced, but they have something that makes them more powerful than any of those things. They have the ability to make you matter to them, to make your children matter to them, to make your future matter to them. And once you matter to a human, they will move mountains to protect you. Now standing at the door, watching Sarah work while surrounded by younglings from across the galaxy, he knew his words had been true. Humans had not conquered the galaxy with weapons. They had not conquered it with technology. They had conquered it with something much simpler and much more powerful. They had conquered it with care, with patience, with the radical idea that someone else's children mattered as much as their own. Sarah looked up and saw him watching. She smiled and waved. Then she turned back to her work. Thra had pulled a blanket to her desk. Sarah reached down without looking. She tucked it around the young Vikrel's spine ridges. She made sure Vithra was covered and warm. Then she kept working, just like she had that first night 6 months ago, just like she would every night after. Because that was what humans did. They cared, they protected, they loved, and they kept working. The galaxy had learned something important. Sometimes the greatest strength is not the ability to destroy. Sometimes it is the ability to nurture. Sometimes it is the ability to see a cold child and think not of danger or inconvenience or species differences. Sometimes it is the ability to think only, they need help. I can help, so I will. And in that simple thought, humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors, not as warriors, but as something the galaxy had needed all along, as caregivers, as protectors, as family,